Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Emmy Award-winning production designer Michael Wylie, whose latest project is the hit Netflix series Avatar: The Last Airbender. Uh, Michael, this animated series was beloved in its time, had this huge resurgence, I feel like, during the pandemic when a lot of people were rewatching the animated series and
Right.
younger generations were getting interested as well. So I guess like for just top like for starters, like what was your first experience with the property and like kind of before you came on board this live action series?
Well, I definitely heard people talk about it before, and I'm always down for some good animation, and I really love the I started watching it, and I really loved the really simple style of this of the anime, and I thought that it would be obviously a really interesting project, but also just sort of like a lot of fun to I don't want to say recreate because I don't think we recreated anything. I think we were, I think we stayed pretty true to the source material, but it was very exciting. I mean, I'm older than I think the average Avatar: The Last Airbender watcher, so I didn't, I didn't see it ever until somebody talked to me about it. But it's a really great show. I've been doing some research for it, and it's such the hero's it's the complete sort of hero's journey, um, in a way that kids can understand, and now all those kids have grown up and they're all nearly 30, and it's still great stuff.
You mentioned something there that I was like, you're obviously not doing recreations, you're creating all this stuff. The other thing I was struck by is obviously like when you're doing an animated show, it's kind of like sky's the limit in terms of your imagination. And here it's live. So like I just was like blown away by the stuff you're able to kind of create. And I guess like, yeah, how did you kind of like this everything about the show is so big. I just watching it, I was like, how did they do all this for lack of better words? I guess like how did you like start when you're kind of creating these worlds and these sets? Like where did you start in terms of like research and your approach to like how to translate what I think you're saying? Like people are expecting it to look like, even if it's not a recreation, they have maybe expectations for how it should look or how they think it should look. So then how do you kind of approach that to make them feel like they're getting what they want or what they wanted from the animated version, but in a live action thing where it's so much bigger?
Yeah, the boring sort of practical version of this is that, you know, um, you can't take a really flat. I never want to say cartoon, but you know what I mean. You can't take a relatively flat thing and then turn it into the kind of cinematographic look that people expect today. I mean, people are very savvy. A viewer is very savvy as to what they're seeing. It would have been really fun to do a wacky flat version of that show. But no one was interested in that. And no one was interested in my original idea of, really going to town and making it look like cartoony. Because I thought also that would be really fun. And I have this really long held belief that people watch television because they don't really care what's going on outside their window. If you tell somebody that a kid can, blow fire out of his hands, and a kid can fly on tufts of wind, they're all for it. And I think that there are a couple of ways to, as what my job description is to sort of, help in telling that story. I think there's a couple of ways to head towards this, and one of them is to play it really flat and play it as though like, oh, this is the regular world, but also these people have these powers to do these things. Or like I've done in other shows where you go like, okay, we're not going to create this wacky world, but I think the audience has to believe that these things that these people are doing are possible in this world. And so I don't think that speaks necessarily to a um, um, a world that we necessarily recognize. So that was my first thought. That my first thought was, let's do something really fun and cool and something that people haven't seen before, even though they've all seen this. And so there's another wrinkle in this, which was that Netflix were absolutely determined to use this virtual, this virtual technology, this volume technology where I'm sure lots of people have seen it. They used it in The Mandalorian, and it's the world's biggest LCD screen, LED screen, and you build sets inside this giant cavernous room, and the sets are the foreground to the wall, which is the background. So those things, the planning for those volume spaces had to start 6 months before we were going to shoot them. And so I had to start right away in not even getting my feet wet, really. I had to start designing sets that people all over the world were going to start using, Unreal Engine, and start building in, cyberspace, like right away. So approval process was really quick. We got we came up with this plan that the Fire Nation looks like this, the Earth nations look like this, and the rest of them, which was not a far cry from what you saw in the animated series, but we wanted to make it real, and we wanted to make it very textural and make it feel like something that you'd want to look at, like the Tibetan stuff for all the Southern Air Temple things. It's so incredibly chunky and textural, and we wanted to make sure that all that got included in. So we had to go at this with two armies going in the same direction, and it was something I'd never done before. So it was a really interesting way to start a show.
And how, having done it now, how do you feel? Like, it seems like obviously you pulled it off. I think anybody who's watched the show would say that it looks like you're saying exactly right. But I'm like, how do you feel having done it now?
It's an incredible technology. I will say that probably I don't know if you noticed, but it took, over a year for the post-production to be done on this show. And so it's, I would say in a couple of years, this technology is going to be really user-friendly and great. But it took up a lot of our time, these Zoom meetings in the middle of a pandemic, by the way, these Zoom meetings for these volume spaces would last 6 hours kind of every day, and trying to figure out what goes in, how it works, how the stuff comes out of the set and the new stuff goes in. And then it's a really incredibly technical process, and I'm not the most technical of people. I can run this computer that we're Zooming on, and I can work my phone. And don't ask me to send you a Google Doc, but it came out really nice. And I think it's such a marvelous tool for, especially in a show like this where we have to be in all four corners of the earth, 3 times in each episode. How else do you shoot that if not using this thing that we used?
And again, I think it looks really, it's also used because it looks so good, right? I mean, I think maybe fooling is not the right word, but I mean, as a viewer, you're like, they are going to these different places, I mean, they think that helps.
It was incredible for things that were not quite so big, like, for instance, like the deck of the ships that they were on. This technology was great for that, because you could stand on the non-moving floor of the stage in front of these screens, and because the screens were going like this, you felt you were on the deck of a ship, and it was really disconcerting. But in the camera, which you could see in real time, there was no lag for visual effects or anything. You could see it in real time through the lens. It was pretty great.
In terms of how about in terms of you mentioned all these different worlds, and obviously the show has got these roots in Asian culture and stuff. How much research did you do, and how'd you kind of to make all those worlds look, again, maybe authentic to what they're based on, but obviously it's not it's not, you know what I mean? It is
Yes.
It's a fantasy series, but making it authentic to that, where it's not like a fantasy series like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, that kind of typical look.
Right. Well, just to start the list, we made these very arbitrary decisions that the Fire Nation were going to be sort of like Vietnamese, Southeast Asian, the Earth nations were going to be China, Japan. The nomads are obviously southern and northern, tribes, and so that was the first step. And the second step is I have this really glib kind of response to people a lot, which is that, like, if you want this to be accurate, or if you want this to be, you should get a like a person who's like got a PhD in like Asian studies. And this isn't a documentary. We're not making a documentary. We're making a really pretty TV show where people will go like, wow, that looks cool, I want to go there. So I would get in so much trouble if I got rated on how authentic or inauthentic a lot of this stuff was, because it's not, and I don't think it has to be. And I err on the side of like pretty and fun. Like there's tons of production designers out there who will happily do authentic and not a piece of anything out of place. I'm just not that guy.
I feel like you're maybe also, I think it's authentic to this show, right? I mean, I think that's what you're being authentic to, or like the feel of the show, right? Like maybe that's
Yeah,
it, right? It doesn't need to,
yeah,
it's not a documentary like you're saying. It is a
it's not.
fantasy sci-fi series, but it does look real. I mean, that I think at least you're like, it does feel like, yeah, like you said, they're like kind of, they're rooted in some of these things, but you're kind of taking creative license.
Yeah, and I learned something really interesting early on, that most Asian culture is, for the most part, is Chinese Asian culture, so that everything kind of stems out of that like a fountain. So it's really easy to the learning curve for any kind of knowledge that you would have about cultural architecture, for example. The trail is very easy to follow, and so we also wanted to add modern aesthetics. You have to keep in mind, like, they just did Shogun, and they were using a 900-year-old, like samurai language, and they were, they really went for it. We had a bunch of kids who were saying like gosh and wow, and so the pressure to be like authentic and absolutely correct is lessened. Although, every one of the showrunner and I think all of the writers were all Asian, and would side eye if things weren't done like their grandmother did them. And it's like you could say the same thing about Italian culture, and you could say the same thing about any other culture. So I did get things wrong, but I want to say that it was on purpose, and I just wanted to make a good looking show.
Do you have, like, in terms of this creating some of these sets, like, was there, I mean, which ones were you like were the biggest challenge, or I mean, like, or were you like, oh, like I was looking, like, it's hard to pick out one because, like you said, the show is like going so many different places. But I was like,
Yeah.
the Kyoshi Village, I thought was like really cool. Like when they go there, I think that set is like incredible. And it looks like it just looks so real. I feel silly for saying this is like real, but it does. It looks so good. Stuff
Well,
like that. Like, how much was that for
that
you?
one
Like,
was real.
okay,
That
there
one,
you go. Great.
yeah, we went, once we started figuring out this virtual technology, it became very apparent to some of us that we needed to get off that stage every once in a while. And at the end of what happens in Kyoshi Village, we have to light a lot of buildings on fire, and it's just really not a great idea to light buildings on fire inside a soundstage.
Okay.
So the director, Michael Goy, said, I think we should build this somewhere, and I think that we should make it look as as authentically untouched as we can. And he said, do whatever you want, just make it look like a Kurosawa movie. So that was, we went to a working gravel pit in British Columbia, and they gave us a section of this gravel pit, and we built the roads, and we built the buildings, and we built everything. We built a river that ran through the middle of it. It was an incredible undertaking, but it worked out great for us because we were able to get off the stage. We were able to get out of the studio. We were able to like open the show up quite a bit. So that was a good one.
When you're building stuff like that, like you building literally like in a whole town, right? Like you're saying, like how much, like how long does that take? Like what is the timeline for that, or how do you even like kind of organize to make sure you? I'm sure you don't have a lot of time, so like how do you do that?
Well, and this one, for some reason, we did have a lot of time, and I'm a bit practical. Much to a lot of people's chagrin, I can't help but being a little bit practical. And so what we did was we designed 4 or 5 hut kits basically, and one, A through E, and then said build 10 A's, 10 B's,
Huh.
10 C's. And so they had like, so construction had this thing where they could build parts, drive them the 60 miles to where the set was, and sort of once the road got built, and then the greens guys went out into the forest that was surrounding the place, cut down 60-foot tall pine trees, dug holes and stuck the pine trees in the holes, and created like a living, this living village out of what we had around us. So I think we had a couple of months, but it was it worked out really well for a lot of reasons.
And how about like not to just go through the whole thing because like I said, I'm sure I could do, but I was like, how about a Mashu? Like, and how did you guys kind of like think about that location? I guess.
Everyone was really excited about Amashi because they, in the series, they made such a big deal out of it always. It was the city of the, it was the city it was the big, shiny, beautiful city. And so once the Unreal Engine guys got started on the town, we had quite a giggle and wanted to make Boomy's lair, Boomy's, castle, Boomy's palace. It absolutely nuts. We wanted to make it like really nuts. So all those tile, that was supposed to be vaguely Indian, and so all the tiles on the floors and were all printed. Like everything was made. The tables were made. The chandeliers in there that had like green crystals in them were all made. It was a beautiful thing.
And then how about again? I feel like I'm Chris Farley showing this, but it is really how about like the Fire Nation and that whole like that again feels like really cool. Like how did you kind of like think about that?
The big throne room.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was, that's iconic. And so we didn't go too far flung from the cartoon. It was a long straight thing down to the throne and columns, and all those columns were 30 feet tall and on wheels, and you could push them around. And but we had there was a lot of problems with that set in because it's so moist in Vancouver, and the floors would peel up, and it was the decals of the gold foil of decals around all the big columns would fall off. And but it was that one was easy in that we looked at the various the various times it comes up in the cartoon, and kind of really went for it. Avatar, the cartoon series, is really interesting because I think theoretically I think they sent different episodes out to different animators, because different episodes of that show look completely different, especially in the second season. So there were lots of versions of the Fire Nation throne room that we had to kind of pick from.
Do you have like you mentioned like not like kind of not adapting, let's say, like, or like recreating, right? You're like kind of doing new things. So like was there something too that you were like, I guess was there one you would say like you fully created kind of whole cloth, or like what would you like kind of single out?
Yeah, Boomy's palace, I think, was our invention. The overtopness of that was our invention. I wanted Aang to, as he got away from where he grew up, I wanted him to have an adventure, and I wanted him to be, awed by what he saw wherever we could make him awed. So that was a really good chance for us to awe him.
And then I'm sure this is obviously the short answer to this is probably yes. But I mean, how much are you working like side by side with like the VFX team on this stuff that you're creating to make like, because obviously there's so much visual effects on the show too. So like how much, I guess, are you kind of like in concert with them when you're creating these sets?
Very, very, very close. I mean, because this technology was so new, there are very few people who, claim to know how it works. And so I could not be authoritative at all about how this was going to work out and what it was going to look like. And we didn't know what anything would look like until 6 months later when it showed up. Um, it's like getting a package from Estonia. It's like you never know when it's gonna, like, it takes a long time to get there, and then you don't know what's going to be in the box. And so they had to handle all of the visual effects had to handle all the changes, all of the finding of vendors to make these images, because in a lot of ways we in the art department had a show to make, and um, we hadn't shot much yet, so there wasn't much for VFX to work on except for getting these images ready for the volume. So I would say that they more or less took the lead on this stuff. And what we did was sent a lot of reference and research and pictures and stuff like that to them, so that and then drawings of what we thought the environments looked like. And then, crossed our fingers and waited a couple months to see what came back.
And then I know obviously the show's coming back for season 2. Have you thought, I guess, like, are you already thinking about that?
Yes, I do. I have a whole plan, and it's the frenetic pace of book one was something like they were getting a lot of story out. They were getting a lot of background out. They were covering a lot of ground. And what I've read of season 2 is a little bit slower. And we get time to get to know these people like as characters, which is my absolute favorite part. I love the storytelling process of production design. I love being a really annoying writer in the background, like coming up with backstory. And so it's kind of my favorite part.
And there's so much. I mean, the characters are great. It's a really fun show. Michael Wylie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks
Emmy-winning
for having
production
me.
designer for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Great stuff. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.